Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. I'm going to kick this video off with an exclusive, and it pertains to the RTX 30 refresh, aka RTX 30 Super, as I've actually been given some information regarding both a desktop and mobile. So I'll start things out with the mobile side first, because quite frankly things are a little more solid in that area. So as for these GPUs, I've been told that they definitely do exist. Now this is not new information. Lenovo themselves actually managed to leak this, but of course we've not exactly known what they will encompass. And I was told that this announcement is almost certainly going to be early next year. The target currently seems to be CES. Of course, things are just so up in the air at the moment in the tech world, but this announcement does seem to be relatively solid so far. Now, as for the performance/specifications, well, there is probably going to be differences in memory configuration, but the real info I guess you guys want is performance. Like, if you're considering buying, let's say, a laptop right now, are you going to be missing out if you don't pick up the RTX Super early next year for, again, mobile? And the answer is not hugely. Of course, it will depend upon the model and different configurations, stuff with the laptop, but I've been told around 5 to 10%. So for example, if you have an RTX 3060 mobile solution, well, the Super variant could be 5 to 10% faster, which, yeah, it's not a huge amount more, but it's basically just a small refresh, essentially, just to have Nvidia push another product out of the door. And we all know at the moment, in terms of GPU land, things are very interesting. Not only because Intel will be releasing their own solution, which just so happens to be kind of Q1 anyway, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of this is being spurred on by that, but yeah, AMD are also pushing out a lot of their own products, and of course there's that rumour that Navi 2X is going to see a refresh on the 6nm process, which will obviously bring performance up a little bit depending on what they do with the specification. There's a lot of conflicting information whether this will release simultaneous to RDNA 3 or whether it will launch later. So previously I put out a video to state that in terms of the desktop side of things, basically AIBs have yet to be briefed. Now, the source that's been giving me the mobile information has proven to be pretty damn reliable in the past. And what Lev told me is that, well, yeah, desktop is probably going to see a super refresh, but as far as I understand anyway, the performance targets, again, are not going to be something incredibly different. To be clear here, what I mean is that we're not going to see, a radically improved architecture. It's not going to be like Ampere 2.0. You kind of get what I'm saying. There may be differences in memory configuration. A really obvious one, just for example, would be an RTX 3070 Super that might have, say, 16 gigabytes of RAM. I wasn't told that specifically, but yeah, I mean, these are the kind of changes that we might see just to make the GPU stand out more in the market. And it really does depend. To all of my current information, the lower series Nvidia SKUs, that's the 3060 and 3060 Ti, they are on the market more readily, but cards like the 3080 and 3080 Ti, well, yeah, they are not as prevalent. And there are a lot of reasons that this could be. The most obvious, of course, is that the cores are much larger to mass produce, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Nvidia are pushing the 3090 out of the door simply because, well, let's just be honest, guys, there's just more profit to be made there. It'll be very interesting to see what happens to the RTX 3080 and 3080 Ti prices over the coming months. And another little tidbit, and yeah, this one's quite interesting. Just kind of speaking to a few people now in the industry, while of course Nvidia are definitely on notice regarding AMD, like it's very difficult to say that AMD's trajectory in GPUs hasn't been very impressive. RDNA 1, from what I understand, there were features that were held back for RDNA 1 simply because they were not ready in time. I've discussed that previously. And RDNA 2 is really impressive. It's not only very efficient in terms of scalability, but just in terms of raw performance. And RDNA 3, just across the stack, is looking really good. But, yeah, from what I'm understanding in the industry right now, the scuttlebutt, there's a lot of folks at Nvidia and even AMD who are actually more nervous about Intel. And I know that, at the moment my channel seems to be quite pro-Intel, but yeah, I'm told this by two sources. One who actually has very close ties at AMD. And it does seem that the industry is quite nervous at the moment of Intel because apparently their R&D expenditure on GPUs is really high. Now, just to put my cards on the table, I'm going to be real with you all. I don't think Intel are going to beat the top-end Nvidia and AMD cards this time around. I think they're going to be decent architecture, and I do think that the drivers are probably going to be fully featured, but I think the 4090 or the, RX 7970 or whatever the hell it ends up being called is probably going to, just beat Intel in terms of raw performance. But obviously Intel are going to be playing the long game, and personally I'm just very fascinated to see how all of this plays out. AMD in particular, of course, are pushing their A+A solutions, that is AMD CPU and GPU, and they've been doing this for quite a while, and AMD's APUs are becoming increasingly powerful, and it's hard to deny that when DDR5 becomes, well, a thing, there's an awful lot of performance there, especially if you were to couple this with a small smattering of Infinity Cache with an APU. And again, one thing that I've been told about AMD APUs, and I have been given more information on what I'm about to say, including the name of all of this, but I've been asked not to say it on camera. But basically, yeah, there seems to be a unified memory system for AMD's upcoming APUs. So it's going to be more console-like, I suppose, in terms of how the unified memory system works. You can kind of, run with that and, kind of figure out what I mean by that if you want. So just a quick update with the AM5 situation. There's been a very interesting document which has leaked along with tons of other files from Gigabyte. I'm sure most of you are aware at this point that Gigabyte were basically hacked and a crap ton of files were leaked onto the internet. Now, rather interestingly, there was not only a ton of information about Threadripper and Genoa, but also, of course, AM5. Unfortunately, at least as far as I understand, so please correct me if I've missed something, but there doesn't seem to be a full breakdown of every single SKU performance data, at least again to my knowledge. But one thing that is interesting is it basically confirms dual channel DDR5 memory for, Zen 4 for AM5, and furthermore PCIe Gen 4 support. If you've been following the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I've said a couple of times that this is the case. A motherboard manufacturer actually told me that this was what AMD were targeting. And one of the reasons, obviously DDR5 memory is just a no-brainer, but one of the reasons that we're seeing a PCIe Gen 4 signaling as opposed to Gen 5, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it's just more expensive and difficult to implement. And two, yeah, AMD just doesn't feel they need it at the moment. So why are Intel doing it, I hear you ask, with Alder Lake? Well, yeah, that's an interesting one. Speaking to a couple of sources who obviously wouldn't want to be attributed to any comments, essentially I was told that Intel are using Alder Lake as kind of like not just a flagship in terms of performance, which again, until we get benchmarks, I'll remain somewhat skeptical, but also trying to prove themselves as a technology leader. It also, however, could have interesting ramifications as to the pricing of the boards, again, because of PCIe Gen 5. So, technically speaking, there could be some scenarios where Intel does have some advantages. Then again, it's not like we have a huge abundance of Gen 5 SSDs or whatever anyway, and it would possibly be more interesting in like a networking environment. However, while games don't exactly take full advantage of, let's say, PCIe Gen 4 at the moment with either GPUs or SSDs, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with direct storage, sampler feedback, and all of that type of stuff in the next couple of years. Obviously, we know that there's going to be a crap ton, that's a technical measurement, of data that's being thrown around, and obviously with direct storage, the data is essentially compressed as it's being thrown around the system, so it's actually compressed while it's leaving the SSD. You know, it gets basically copied directly into the GPU memory where it's decompressed. That is for like texture assets and that type of thing. For data which is destined for the CPU, such as, you know, I don't know, something like audio, let's just say audio, it's a simple one, then obviously the CPU is still going to decompress that, but it's considerably easier. So it's going to be very interesting because, in theory, because those assets are still compressed, they're not going to be as dense, they're not going to be as heavy as compared to like uncompressed textures, but you are still going to be throwing around a whole massive number of them. You know, we've seen already what's happening with the Lumen demo and Unreal Engine, and there's quite a lot of UE5 stuff already, and I think this is a good indicator of where we're going to be going in the future. And the last thing I want to cover, just because I personally think it's interesting, and this is Tesla Robot. Now, obviously, I don't really need to introduce you guys to Tesla. They've been doing an awful lot, obviously, in EVs and other things. And Elon Musk has got, well, his fingers in many pies. I think one of the companies which kind of goes under the radar, or I guess under the ground, is obviously the Boring Company. But yeah, they basically have unveiled an autonomous robot. I'm going to tackle this fairly briefly, although I will, of course, link the video in the description. I don't know how interested you guys are on this stuff, but if you are interested, then I can cover it more. Personally, I think it's cool. Maybe I just watched too much Terminator as a kid, I don't know. Anyway, so it's world built by humans for humans. It's friendly. That could be good. That could be useful. Eliminates dangerous, repetitive, and boring tasks. Its height is 5'8", its carrying capacity is 45 pounds, so it's not exactly going to be doing super duper heavy lifting. Its weight is 125 pounds. It can deadlift 150, so it's just over body weight with its deadlift. Its running speed is apparently 5 miles per hour, and when its arms are fully extended, because obviously, you know, you're kind of, I don't know if my arms being caught on camera, who cares? Obviously your arms are much weaker in that case, like if you're doing like, I don't know, you know, front delt raises or something, you'll kind of know what I mean. It's only around 10 pounds, which is not super heavy, but if you're kind of doing lighter work, that type of thing, then in theory that should be absolutely fine. What other things caught my eye? Well, there's actually a lot of things that caught my eye. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's 5'8", 125 pounds. It's got various screens, and essentially it's made of lightweight, durable material. It's got human-level hands, so in theory you can do fine object manipulation pretty easily. So for example, if you're trying to paint something, it shouldn't be too difficult for it to manipulate, I don't know, brushes, or, you know, open containers, or do whatever the hell it's programmed to do. And yeah, there's a whole crap ton, again, a technical measurement, of actuators. So it's got 12 in its arm, 2 in its torso, 12 in its legs, 2 in its neck, and finally 12 in its hands, because them our fingers require lots of manipulation. As you can imagine, this also requires a ton of AI. And I have to say, guys, I find it really interesting. Again, I will grant you, I probably watched way too much Terminator as a kid. And yeah, I don't think that this is going to become like a robot army tomorrow or anything like that. This is going to, you know, threaten us all. If you are watching this, by the way, Tesla AI, I for one welcome, you know, the new overlords and all of that. But, you know, there's a deeper question, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think of this in terms of like, well, basically just what's going to happen to those jobs. There's a very interesting, you know, debate, of course, of what happens as automation increases, especially when we start to move towards, you know, just self-driving cars and cabs. And yeah, I mean, this stuff is just happening. It's like whether you like it or not. And honestly, I don't really have the answers for this one. I'm not well versed enough in, well, just the economics of the world to really kind of answer what's going to happen in like 20, 30 years time. I don't think anyone can predict how this is going to shift things, but it's a very interesting, it's got a lot of interesting potential. And obviously, you know, just kind of myself, who's more, you know, very future thinking, I kind of like the idea of what's going to happen in 20, 30 years time, for example. I will be interested to see what would happen with applications such as this, obviously a more advanced version that could possibly do like, I don't know, like setting up bases on Mars, or possibly doing like mining on asteroids and all of that stuff. It's a very interesting world that we're living in. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's just about all I want to kind of talk about that, because again, I don't know how interested you guys are for me to wax lyrically about stuff that isn't necessarily GPUs and CPUs. If you are, then let me know or something. Anyway, thanks very much for checking out the video, guys. Take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.